Greetings, Mark Goering here, publisher of The Sun, and today I'm with my favorite monthly guest, because he's the only monthly guest, George Epstein.
That's the only way I can achieve that glory.
Yeah, how you doing?
I'm good, very good. Warm, little warmer weather would be nice.
Gosh, you know, if you came in, it's noon on Tuesday, and when the sun's out, even though it was cold this morning, February makes a difference.
Yeah. Yeah, no question about it.
Do you get outside at all in February?
Yeah, most snowshoeing, stuff like that. I'm not doing much downhill skiing anymore, but so I get out some, and I was in Las Vegas, which you read in my column, for a week, and that was nice. It was pretty spiffy, the weather anyway.
Well, I ski, unless my kids are up, which didn't even happen last year, but last year I skied twice, both times with David Shribman. Yeah. So he pressures me to get him a free ski ticket, and then I pressure him to do a video, an interview. Yeah. So, but I haven't seen him. In fact, I got to contact him. This is our time of year. Anywho, okay, we got a bunch of things to talk about. Super Bowl, everybody's talked about it. I know it's Tuesday. Yeah. I'm a Giants fan, so I actually predicted the Seahawks to win, unless destiny really took hold.
The Seahawks were the favorites, should have been the favorites, deserved to be the favorites. And based on what happened Sunday, they were the better team. I think having a left tackle for the Patriots would have been really helpful. Drake May might have had a few more seconds to get the ball off, might have taken a little bit less of a beating. His shoulder might have taken less of a beating. But Patriots played pretty well. Certainly defensively they played pretty well, but they were completely incapable of providing protection for the quarterback, and you can't win professional football games if your quarterback's getting run over all the time.
And you know, and this is always Monday morning quarterbacking, but gosh, just even watching it, a lot of people wanted the Patriots to lose, and I have to admit, I'm one of them, because I'm a Giants fan. I just couldn't believe they're back in the Super Bowl. But I mean, that would have been nice if they win. Drake May is going to be a superstar. But boy, when four guys can sack the quarterback, why didn't they just put in another tight end or help in the little short passes?
You do wonder whether the blocking schedule or schema was adequate to handle that kind of a rush. But in the end, if you have somebody in front of you and you're the defensive tackle or defensive end and you want to get to the quarterback and you've got one guy right in front of you and you simply can run him over, that's a tough call. Even if you've got help, the offensive tackle has help on either side. Campbell was just getting run over.
It's too bad.
Yeah, it was. And he's a rookie, and hopefully he'll develop his skills. He just looks slow and weak.
Yeah, but they could have put whatever.
They could have.
Okay, so did you watch the Bad Bunny, or did you watch the alt?
I watched some of it. I ate a little bit during halftime and prepared foods and stuff. But yeah, Bad Bunny. I don't have any particular interest in listening to a lot of songs in Spanish. That doesn't appeal to me. But I think I read that 40 to 60 million Americans speak Spanish well enough to have understood all the language there. And the sort of the show that went on with Hedges and people and sugarcane, thank you. And yeah, I thought it was kind of cute and creative. And the bottom line is, who cares? It was a singing act at halftime of the Super Bowl when the rest of us go to the bathroom and get something to eat. So I just don't care.
I'm with you in that, you know, being older white guys probably were more attuned to the grassroots rather than than sugarcane or something. But you know, the politics with it and all that, and the conservatives and Trump would be going nuts about it, but it's the NFL. They're all about making money. You're right. I mean, that's what they're. So, you know, and where are they going to expand to? They want to go internationally. They'll probably have a team in Mexico City in the next few years. That's all it's about.
All that, definitely. All part of it. Yeah. And, but I can't underscore enough. Who cares?
Yeah. Did you see the alt halftime show?
I didn't. No. Kid Rock and all that. Yeah. Yeah. No, I didn't tune in for that.
I got to admit, I saw a couple of YouTube things, and I'm like the least culturally sophisticated guy in the world. But boy, it almost was like, to me, outside of Kid Rock, and you couldn't understand him anyway, right? Like most singers. But they had this country guy on, and it was almost like a SNL skit. He had a country song, and he was a guy with a guitar, and Rob probably knows who he is, but not that you're a country guy, but he knows musicians. And he was saying like, well, it's not a great country because my kid has to go to a school with a transgender.
Really?
And he says, all I want to do in life is be able to go fishing, be able to feed my dog, be able to wear my boots, and be able to drive my pickup truck.
Well, I guess Bad Bunny was very non-political in comparison. Yeah. So, but who cares?
Who cares? Okay, so let's move on to something. Speaking of politics, state politics. Let me start off, and I know you want to talk about town meetings and the importance of town meetings. But first, let's get to your column and your not beef, but your exchange with Steve Dupree.
Yeah.
Steve Dupree's a local guy.
Yeah.
Was a local guy.
Yeah.
And I think he still has a place here in somewhere in Jackson or something. But well respected, Republican, big shot forever in the state. He was the Republican chair of the Republican committee.
Yeah.
Organization
Federal,
in the state.
Yeah, national. Yeah.
And what?
The National Republican Committee, as well as being the head of the Republican Party in New Hampshire for many years.
Okay, I didn't know that. And I think he developed Saco Woods over here.
Yeah,
he
one
did
of his multiple developments.
So go ahead. What did you say about him? How he responded?
Well, I was writing a column for things I wished for. One of the things I wish for, and I aim it at you as well, is that New Hampshire had more resources in the press for investigative reporting. And we don't have adequate investigative reporting in New Hampshire. And when funny stuff happens, particularly in state government, but local governments as well, the ability and the resources available to the newspapers, the television stations, the radio, to really dig into those things are really very limited. I think it's very tough for an industry, the media, which is struggling financially in a lot of ways, to be able to have the resources to really dig in on interesting stories. And one of the examples I used as something that I thought would be interesting to explore is this super powerful Republican leader in New Hampshire for decades, and how much money he has raked in subsidies and financial support, government money, government loan subsidies, direct government loans, the purchase of his buildings by government entities, the leases on his buildings by government entities. He's amassed a large business, a successful business, and generated massive amounts, probably tens of millions of dollars of government money in one form or another, subsidizing his developments.
But I think
I just said it was something to explore.
Right, and so the inference, if I was him, and I think he was defensive about it, is that the inference is, oh, it must be something
absolutely
snaky going
that
on.
was the inference.
Okay.
And that's where I think New Hampshire comes up short. We don't have people who can really dig in on this stuff and assess it and evaluate it, because we don't have a press with the resources to do it.
But do you think he's crooked, or do you think it was just, those cozy things happen all the time?
No,
not even cozy.
They didn't used to in New Hampshire, not at this scale. The kinds of money that he has pulled in from the New Hampshire Housing Authority and all the federal sources that are approved and authorized by state government, and the power he holds in state government. I mean, he's clearly the Republican guy controlling the Republican Party to a significant degree for decades. And the tens of millions of dollars he's gotten in government subsidies and supports is something I think that New Hampshire should be able to explore. And I just threw that out there, and he responded in, I thought, a very odd way, nothing nasty. I mean, he said, George, you should aim before you shoot, but he failed to provide any information about how much money he has received from the federal government and the state government and state monies that were passed through from the federal government, and local support from Concord and the city of Concord, their TIF districts. There's an awful lot of subsidies that are out there. You ran an article in The Sun recently with Ms. Dupree promoting CPACER, the CPACER program. Right. So that would blow a whole show to try to understand the CPACER show and CPACER program, and I'm not an expert on it. But I can tell you of the 424 state legislators, there are a tiny number that have any idea what they voted for under that, number one. Number two, it's a subsidy. It's a government subsidy that basically permits developers to offload debt onto the people they loan money to, they lease properties to or sell properties to, and they make the local government the collector of the money. So instead of me as a developer having, millions and millions of dollars on my books and liabilities on my books, it moves on to the people living or utilizing the property, and the town becomes the tax collector with this extra assessment, takes the money from whoever's using the property and gives the money to the mortgage company who funded the development. So instead of the developer owing that money, having to collect the money from whoever's using the property and then paying off the loans, instead the developer escapes liability for those loans and moves that liability onto whoever's living there, and the town becomes the collector of the money. And that's the process. And so if you want to subsidize developers, fine, support CPACER, put it in place in Conway, and you want more large developments in Conway, that would be one way to do it because it's just such a good deal for developers. But if you question how a complex program like this got through the New Hampshire legislature, driven by people like Steve Dupree, who are incredibly powerful and influential in the state government, and who benefit personally and financially from it, then that's the sort of thing I think we should explore. It'll be fascinating to me to see what the town of Conway does with regard to
two things. One, if this interview with mentioning Steve will probably get to Steve. So Steve, if you're out there, when you're in Jackson, come on in. We'll do an interview with you because we can talk about politics. I didn't know that about this PACER program. I did not know that the town is the collector of that. So you've enlightened me, and so we're going to follow that up because I thought it was just hands off. It was just an easier way for developers to.
It's a tax assessment.
Okay, so let's leave it at that. That's a good one. Thanks for the news tip, George.
Sure.
You
answered
our news tip line. All right, so let's start with the state in general. And I said this before on the air, is that I've talked to a high-ranking government official and another person in the Republican Party. And they're both really concerned about the Republican New Hampshire legislature really getting too extreme. And Ayotte, who's really in the mold of Sununu, I would say, just sort of conservative, but not going to the extreme. There were 12 vetoes, and the House voted in January to sustain them, meaning they voted for them, but they didn't get enough votes to overturn her vetoes. Right. And there were 12 of them. And there was everything from book bans to transgender bathrooms to allowing people to not vaccinate their kids for more religious exemptions, default budgets to allow towns to have smaller default budgets by not filling in if they have absences for teachers. It goes on and on and on, which I think Ayotte thought they were pretty extreme. So any comment on the general House?
Well, the announced goal of the Free State Project was to take over New Hampshire's government. Even though it is a minority of the Republicans who are full-blown Free State members, they make the difference. They are essentially in control. The number 2 guy in the House, Osborne, is an unabashed Free State guy and is very extreme. And that's where the more mainstream folks in the Republican Party, the Ayotts and the Sununus and so on, tend to just feel like we've got to draw some lines somewhere. They want to pull back from that. And the flip side of it is the Democratic reaction it forces them to extremes. So you have more extreme Democrats as well. I don't think it's quite as dominant, but you have some very left or progressive or whatever you want to call them, Democrats who are pushing for things that aren't popular in New Hampshire and are not going to be successful in New Hampshire. And it's a reaction to the extremism on the left, on the right, because the right's in control, and maybe it's a natural reaction. And so you look at something like the ICE detainment center in Merrimack, and you have the Republicans in the House saying, tough luck. You knew that the country was going to need detention centers, and they need one in New Hampshire. One would be convenient to have in New Hampshire, and so it was no surprise. You just ought to live with it. And tough luck, Merrimack, if locally you don't want that in your town. And to me, it's all wrapped around a multi-decade problem of state government wanting more and more control over our local towns and cities, wanting to take away authority from our town meetings, from city councils, and wanting to control things from Concord. Even people who call themselves conservative and who think like I do, that we should have smaller government in many ways, and that we should have more local control, as close as we can to the people for the decision making that we have. And as soon as they get to Concord, their mindsets change. We just know better in Concord than you people do out in the woods, and we're going to do it our way.
And it's funny about that. I agree with you, because there was the other legislation that have tax caps, budget caps for school budgets. And that's, even though I think a lot of people would agree with it, but the fact that it was coming from the state is what really upset people. And then the opposite thing, conversely, is that they just shot down the $2 hotel fee again. And I'm sorry, but I don't understand why anybody can understand that it's not a tax, it's a fee. And to have the Republican legislators say, we don't want to discourage people from staying in hotels.
$2.
For $2.
So it's just doctrinaire politicking. The Republicans who ran on a no new taxes platform want to be pure, and we're going to oppose any government taking of money from people, and you could categorize it as a fee or a tax, but it is government taking a little bit of money from people. And the absurdity of it is that it doesn't respond at all to the generosity of the tourism towns that produce so much revenue from the state in the meals and rooms tax. We generate in Conway and in this area in general far more than most of the other areas around the state, and yet we get the same proportionate payout from the rooms and meals tax as the rest of the state. Why not reward us for all of the revenue that we generate? And the state won't, and it's purely something that they enjoy talking about when they stand up in, Franklin or Bedford, and they're able to say, look, I voted against this extra $2 that they're trying to charge you when you want to go to Conway and spend the night there. And we're keeping taxes down, and we're pure. So it's ugly politics, and it clearly hurts our towns. Just like the STR stuff, where the rest of the state doesn't care about STRs, but those of us in tourism areas where STRs have taken over much of the housing in our community, we gain no protection from the state because they don't care. It's not
we
their
disagree
problem.
on the STR thing, but that's a whole other topic. I'm not for STRs. I just don't think that they dominate. I don't think you always say, "Hey, get rid of the STRs, housing crisis solved."
It's done here.
I do not believe that in a heartbeat.
What's the percentage in Conway? 20% of all the housing, more than 20% of all the housing is in STRs.
Yeah, but how much is second homes? Like 40%? Most of the people, they wouldn't be. Those second homeowners are not going to go. They're not going to be on the market. They would just. There's some few, and there's no question about it. But we'll leave that discussion. We'll figure that out because it's all going to be solved. And we got. And this is just a small digression here, but we got literally hundreds of rental units coming on the market this year.
And we're going back to what I just said, which was subsidies and subsidies and subsidies from taxpayers to subsidize the development of all that construction, and the end result is that the developers do well, the people who ultimately are renting that stuff out do well, the taxpayers suffer a cost, and it's all to subsidize STRs. We wouldn't need any of those subsidies. We taxpayers wouldn't be subsidizing those developments if the STRs were turned into year-round housing.
That's one man's opinion. We'll leave
Absolutely.
it at that. Sure.
I think I have an audience out there that would largely agree with me.
I think that the audience out there agrees that they don't want them in their neighborhood. I don't think it would solve the.
That's the other part of it. That's absolutely right.
Speaking of media and influence, I don't even know if you know this one, but there's a bill going on, and I'm on the board of the New Hampshire Press Association, so I have intimate knowledge of this stuff. So Christine Perez is a Republican state rep in Londonderry, and so there's a bill that we've testified on. Do you know this one?
A little bit. Go ahead.
Okay, so what it is that if you, and this is all about this woman, Deb Paul, who owns a little dinky one-man shop newspaper down there, and she's the one that really encouraged Christine Perez to do it, sponsor it, and they got a bunch, and the president, McQuaid, Brendan McQuaid, who's the son of what's his name?
I'm trying to remember his first name.
His dad, famous dad,
the union leader boss.
Yeah, union leader and all that, and a very smart guy, all of them. And so anyway, the idea is that if you advertise in a local newspaper, you get a credit off your BET or profits tax.
Right.
What do you think about that?
Well,
I think it's great.
So, understandably. So let's just be clear what it is. And you're taking tax money that would otherwise go to the state for taxes, and you're taking that tax money and you're subsidizing newspapers.
The Conway Daily Sun.
The Conway Daily Sun. And the history in America and in the world of government support for the press isn't a terribly healthy situation. It's not a healthy model for independence of the press, for the press being willing to go after and do the kind of research they need to on corruption in government. It's not a good idea. And one of the reasons it's not a good idea is because the government can always pull that money. Just as, look at the colleges and universities. They became so dependent on federal money that when Trump came in and said, I don't like what you're doing on your campuses, I want you to change, I want you to do this and this and this, and he started pulling hundreds of millions and ultimately billions of dollars from various colleges. It's not healthy to have government subsidizing the press and the investigative capacity of the press. Having said that, boy, it's a tough time. And maybe it's a transitional time where it's a good thing to see more resources available for the local press. And in that sense, it's hard for me to say it's a bad idea. It's hard for me to say it's something that today wouldn't be helpful and wouldn't be would lead to better outcomes, which means a more active and resilient press and more resources for the press to do their reporting. But boy, in the long term, I think it's a scary and a bad policy to go forward in the long term.
I mean, I don't disagree in the high-minded concept of that idea.
That's me. I'm high-minded.
You are high-minded a little bit, and but you're a thinker, so you think that way. Obviously, for a newspaper, that'd be great news for us.
Absolutely.
And I would just counter that by saying it's a trade-off. I mean, is someone going to not go after a specific state rep because a reporter, not whatever? Because it's pretty an indirect influence of, hey, you're going to look and see who voted for it and then go after that person and not go after that person. I think there's so many layers. There are like 8-layer separations of degrees here that nobody would do that. Local reporters, that's the last thing they're thinking about.
If it weren't for Washington the way it is today, I'd say, yeah, that's pretty far out there and unlikely to occur. I'm less sure today. And the extremism is part of it.
Yeah, and the thing is about that, of course, the Radio Association, Broadcast Association, they hate the thing. They say, what about us? Right. And I say, you don't have any news. I mean, for one thing, you don't have news. We're not going to subsidize music. Yeah. And the other thing is when you look at the independent newspapers, is that this is only for local independent newspapers and online. So that would be like In-Depth, New Hampshire, Nancy West's online, very good online State House coverage. Gosh, there ain't many.
No.
Because like Dover and Seacoast and Portsmouth, they're Gannett, so they wouldn't be included. You could list them as like 15 of us or 20 of us.
And I have given up on most of the other sources. In-Depth New Hampshire and the Sun locally, that's the source of New Hampshire news largely now.
And you are.
Well, MUR has one overriding purpose, and that's to make sure the first in the nation primary stays in New Hampshire, because they make millions and millions and millions of dollars on those ads. And you watch poor Adam, what's his name?
Sexton.
Adam Sexton and all that. He is under pressure every week when he does his little news show there to ask every federal person coming, every federal candidate, what are you going to do? Are you going to support the New Hampshire First in the Nation primary? You can watch how money does influence the reporting, and I think it really limits the capacity of MUR to be independent, because they need that money and they want that money.
Yeah, but MUR, it's the old if it bleeds, it leads. I mean, that's typical local. In an urban area, if you see local TV stations, like the first 10 stories about somebody's murdered.
Right, and I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about those things that are politically controversial.
But that's mostly what MUR is. I mean, they're good. I mean, everybody, you see the gas explosion and Nashua and that kind of stuff.
They get people out there. They do.
All right, so speaking of media, one more thing. What about Jeff Bezos and basically cutting the legs off the Washington Post? He cut a third of the staff, 300 people.
You're really on the press stuff here.
Well,
I didn't
since
prepare
it's
for that.
related.
Okay. From the day Bezos took over, you see the impact on the Washington Post as the paragon of liberal reporting, even more than the New York Times, which is very liberal editorial bent, but the capacity of the New York Times to simply gather enormous amounts of information and share it with people is really impressive. They have an enormous amount of data that they provide. Washington Post was a truly liberal, editorially driven newspaper, and you could count on them to provide the Democratic Party perspective on things. So from day one, it was losing its independence, was under pressure to turn around the money losses that were occurring and to start breaking even. And now they've reached a point where, with the newest lead editor and these cuts, they've really kind of backed away and said, we're going to be a local paper in Washington. We're going to have the resources to report locally, and of course that means some political reporting. But they've really shrunk that down to a mere shell of what it was, and the impact of the Trump administration in general on that stuff, and Jeff Bezos's need to buddy up to him along with all the other tech people means that they have to back off editorially. CBS, which I think typically was the most liberal of the three stations, the three networks, four if you include Fox, they've gone with Barry Weiss as the head of their news department. She's the Free Press creator, which is a conservative newsletter that I get in my email. I got it as probably my most valued source of thoughtful conservative perspective on stuff that was happening. But for CBS to hire her, first thing she does is cancel 60 Minutes story that didn't look good for the administration. And so you see CBS rolling over, in part because I'm going to mix them up, but Paramount's trying to buy this one and so on. So in order to get approval to not be restricted by antitrust laws, they need the approval of Trump administration that is politicized, that process, and they have to butter up the administration in order to be able to do business as Paramount. So I think that pressure is so concerning that it even influences my thoughts about the little bitty subsidy that you're going to get.
My comments on the Bezos thing is that on its face, of course, I would knee-jerk would say, hey, you cut 300 staffers, right? We want reporters, and for the amount of money he's losing a year is what he spent on his wedding. I mean, so it's, obviously he's got the pocket
spent a lot on his wedding.
Yeah. Oh, he actually spent more on Melania. What's her name?
Oh, Melania, the movie.
Sorry, the movie. Anywho, but when they stopped endorsing presidential candidates, they lost 250,000 subscribers to start with. And the Post is always, except back in the days of Graham's owning it, they've always struggled with being a local paper or an international paper. And when Bezos came in, he really wanted to make it like an online worldwide, international, like the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times, which that's why they're successful, because they have literally millions of subscribers online, but half of them around the world. And so they have always struggled with that. And so I think it was almost inevitable whether Jeff Bezos was running it or not until they figured out what their real mission was. And when you say local, what is local in Washington?
Yeah.
I mean, they had great, when I'd lived in Washington for a couple of years, they had great metro sections and all this local stuff. But local in Washington is covering Congress.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting situation.
Yeah, no, I don't think that there's some huge break. I don't think it's a moment of a big change that they laid off those 300 people. That was the direction, you're right, that they were heading in.
Yeah, but anyway, it's too bad. Hopefully he just sells it and someone will pick it up. I know someone's interested in the Pittsburgh Gazette. That's shut down completely. That's David Tribman's old paper. Right. So, things change. I mean, there's a lot of information out there. It's just, as I always say with news, the local news, there's always a need for local news. You just got to figure the business model to support it.
Boy, and it's a tough sport. I recognize your business is a tough one.
Yeah. So, Epstein files.
Okay. No relation. No relation.
You always say that as a disclaimer. It's amazing to me about this, and you remember the old, one thing is just awful. They're not releasing all the files, and whether it's redacted and Trump is out, and what's his name, Howard Ludnick, who said he didn't have any connection with him, and it turns out he had some more emails about going to his private. What's amazing to me, though, beyond all the political stuff, how does Epstein get in these circles of powerful people? Remember the old Trilateral Commission?
All right, right.
So the Trilateral Commission was created in the early 70s by David Rockefeller, and people. George Bush, 41, was a member of it, and the Rothschilds. It's always basically the world order.
Right.
Epstein was a member of the Trilateral Commission. Like, how does a guy like George Epstein, who's just
Jeffrey Epstein.
Oh, did I say George?
You sure did.
Oh, God. Jeffrey Epstein. This is your brother. He's your cousin.
No.
Okay.
No relation.
No, okay. So how does a guy like Jeffrey Epstein get in that circle, and doesn't it expose people are falling around the world from this Epstein connection?
Because it's attached to my name, I have spent some time, I don't even like talking about it, but I've spent some time trying to understand that myself, because it's not easy. No, not. At no time in the United States of America has there been any connection whatsoever between those two Epstein families, and there are a bunch of other Epstein families out there, unrelated as well. The financial press, Fortune magazine, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times financial section have done some pretty good exploration, and what you find is that he was a finance guy who was pretty good, had talent as far as investing money and being able to earn off of that, but attached himself to a very small number, the Victoria's Secret guy and the BlackRock big financial company guy, and to a couple of these guys, and took over their finances. And whether, what was the chicken and egg thing? Were there women involved in his ability to take over their finances? Did they come later when he had the money? But he wound up in control of their finances, and based on court filings against him by spouses and heirs and so on of some of these people and the people themselves, he did steal hundreds of millions of dollars from these folks. And then by having control of not just the money he took, but their money, he was able to go to Citibank. Jamie Dimon, who says, oh, I never met him, never heard of him. Jamie Dimon has all this history of how he received recommendations from his staff to get away from this guy, to get rid of him. But Citibank was raking in too much money from fees and so on. You get to manage a couple of $1 billion as Epstein was, and probably more than that, more than $2 billion, then the bankers are connected to you, the politicians are connected to you, the fundraisers for the nonprofits. I don't know what Bill Gates' connection was. It looks spurious, but Bill Gates was out there trying to raise money for the Gates Foundation, and that was one of the ways Epstein got connected. He was connected with Harvard. He had given them a pile of money, either directly from himself or money from the people whose money he controlled. And so insidiously, he embedded himself first with a couple of incredibly wealthy individuals. He ripped off some of their money, but basically lived off of their money, lived very high off of their money, and then used their money to create attachments with the big fundraisers, with political figures, with the big banks, and it multiplies. And I think that's what the American people, you know, they're interested in a sex scandal always, and in seeing that there's justice for the victims of the sex ring and the abuse of young girls, and it's horrible. But we're also interested as an American people in understanding not conspiracy theories, but the actual workings of the elite in America. And the elite consists of the wealthy elite, the political elite, the entertainment elite, and the banking elite. All these people are, we believe and feel, are interrelated, and this spells it out. It points it out, and it points out the sickness of it, the use of girls as commodities by this incredibly wealthy and powerful group of men, because they were men. So I think that's a big part of it. As much as it is about sex crimes, it's also about, and the reason it's so politically important, it's also about who controls this country and has all this influence to get what they want. And that's what I'm talking about when I talk about New Hampshire as well. Right. I see a little minor, small, and a very small scale, you see some of the same ugliness that I don't think was here 20 or 30 or 40 years ago.
Boy, I don't know. I mean, I think it always, you know, the cream rises to the top, whatever you want to call it. The rich get richer. I mean, we know that. Yeah. But, you know, and there should be, maybe you read a few books. There must be a book about who really runs the world. You know, and I know that the ultra wealthy and all that and the Gates, but I remember this is 20 years ago, and Wesley Clark, General Wesley Clark, who was supporting Hillary Clinton. And I remember we were interviewing him over at the Met, and he was supporting Hillary at that time, 2008 or whatever it was. And he said, oh yeah, I met her when I was like a first lieutenant over attaché over in Europe, and Hillary, who was just got out of Wesleyan, wherever she went to college, was over there on some special trip. And they met each other when they were 25.
Kids, yeah.
And, you know, so there's no conspiracy. They just happen to be incredibly talented people that rose to the top, and they still have those connections after 50 years.
So I think that's fair. I don't think it is a conspiracy that's planned out where there's a book somewhere, right, and a 3-ring binder that says these are the rules. But I think it is an incestuous, cozy set of relationships, right, that milk off of each other, and Epstein worked his way into it and became a part of that group, and he delivered on the creepy promises he made to the bad guys that he made them to, and they had that hanging over them. He didn't have to. They talk about him blackmailing people. He didn't have to blackmail people. But you see emails and stuff in the stuff that's been released that says, oh, you know, we share this secret, and we've got this together, and we were in this together, and we shared this moment together. He makes sure they are reminded of that, and they make sure they don't mess with them. So some of those guys that he ripped off, they walked away. They said, yeah, he stuck me for a couple $100 million.
But I'm good.
But I'm good. Yeah, I don't want to get into it with him. I don't want to go to court with this guy. I don't want to be deposed.
It's fascinating. It is a fascinating subject. You know, I mean, people, you know, at all levels of society, it's who you know. I mean, so much of it is. It's just on that level, they're just dealing with much bigger issues than we do. You know, you're down in Silver Lake. When you want an issue, you go to you probably press the selectman down there. You got some interesting issues in Madison. So Shackford resigned, and I remember when, you know, and so I guess the employees using public town property, the dump truck here and that kind of stuff. And I remember when we had the investigation for the North Carolina precinct 20 years ago, and Chandler was the precinct guy, and he left and came back and all that. But I remember the lawyer saying saying to me about what was going on, who was investigating it. He says, the corruption in North Carolina precinct is a mile wide and an inch deep. Meaning, just some guys using trucks, and and it gets carried away. And I guess that's what happened in Madison. What do you?
I will make no comment whatsoever. Town moderator for 39 years and all that. So I'm going to be very careful. But I will make a comment about town government in Madison, school district government. We're in the midst of the most important process that will occur as far as taxes, as far as education, as far as the impact on our communities by local government as Conway and the surrounding towns negotiate the next generation tuition deals. And I am very concerned about what those look like. I'm concerned about the process that's being followed. And I'm going to specifically comment on the Madison one. And this is, I'm not planning to ever run again for Madison school moderator. And so I'm
Are you the school moderator this year?
Oh yeah. But I just finished the school deliberative session, so I'm essentially done.
Okay.
So the town of Madison has a $7-point-something million budget for schools. Roughly half of that budget goes to Conway to pay as appropriately for 6th through 12th grade, 7th through 12th grade, which is roughly half the students. And so that makes sense. But the school board, which is negotiating in secret appropriately, you can't do this publicly, with Conway to come up with the next generation agreement to go forward, announced at the school meeting, the school deliberative session, that we will be working this out, we'll have a hearing, but we're not going to bring this to the town to vote. We, the school board, has been told by our lawyers that we have the authority to enter into a 20-year agreement for half of the entire, well, it could be just 5 years, no, that's right. But whether it's 5 years, but we have the right to enter into a 20-year agreement, a 5-year agreement with half of all the monies that Madison will raise during that period of time, and we don't have to bring it to you for a vote. Well, 20 years ago, they did bring it to the town for a vote, and it was approved. The idea that we voters at a school district meeting are voting on how much we're going to spend on volleyballs and desks, but we're not going to vote on half of the entire budget, millions and millions and millions of dollars for little old Madison over a period of 5 years or 20 years or whatever it is. The idea that they would have the freedom to go ahead and do that and have the lawyers telling them that they can go ahead and do that horrifies me. It basically completely decapitates the town meeting and says to the voters of Madison, who cares what you think? We have the power and we're going to do whatever we want to do. And that is what ripples through our towns, our select boards, our school boards, our budget committees on occasion, and incredibly dominates our state legislature and our governors. It is all about taking the tradition of the town meeting in New England and specifically in New Hampshire, where we have typically historically stronger town meetings, taking away the authority of the voters and taking control as the supposed representatives of the people. And I think this is an enormous threat to our towns. And as the ancient person I am and the 40-year town moderator that I've been, this is a flag I really want to raise.
I think you just wrote your next column.
I have another one planned, but it will be out before the town meeting occurs.
I didn't know that. All right, well, let's, I was going to say something about that, but I don't know.
No, I've shut you up completely.
The cooperative. Okay. A couple people have raised the cooperative idea. Your cooperative idea. Is it too late for that? I mean, it is, right?
Yes and no. I thought, even when I wrote the column, that it would take an extension to the existing agreement or a new agreement for a year or two, so that there would not be under pressure to rush into the cooperative agreement. So I think that it should be going on simultaneously, that it should be part of the discussions, that whatever 5-year, 20-year, 1-year, 2-year agreement that they enter into, that as part of that, a transition plan to a cooperative district is to consideration of a cooperative district should be part of that discussion. I'm not looking to shove it down anybody's throat. I would like to see the towns, the Mount Washington Valley, and I said specifically Madison, Bartlett, and Conway. Those 3 towns should be voting on a cooperative school district sometime in the next couple of years, and then inviting the other towns to join as it makes sense or doesn't make sense. And if they vote it down, fine. I'm done. I won't try again in my remaining years. But it's time for that to really be considered and should be part of the discussions now. Otherwise, it won't come up. Otherwise, it'll be blown off.
Right. Okay. My last topic, unless you have anything, is Johnny Sununu. So John Sununu's running for U.S. Senate, and he's running against Scott Brown, and then it'll be likely Chris Pappas on the other side, right. Democrat. So John was in last couple weeks ago. He pops in, sitting in the office, and I said, "Hey, John, how's it going?" He says, "Oh, blah 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 blah." And I always
don't say hi, Senator.
I don't.
He was a
and it's
former
funny you
senator.
say that because
I would always do that.
And it's funny you say that because I was thinking of that after, is that with him, I don't. With everybody else, I do. Huh. But not that I'm buds with John, believe me, I'm not on the inside, but I've known him for 25 years, since he was a congressman. Yeah. And he just seems like John. Like he tries to come across as like a regular person.
A nice testament.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, so I said, this is 2 or 3 weeks ago. So I said, well, Scott Brown, he was the ambassador to New Zealand or whatever. I said, well, he's probably going to get the Trump endorsement. And John says, well, and John said he says, I got the endorsement of some heavyweights in New Hampshire. And he says, well, he's kind of on the outs with Trump. And sure enough, 2 weeks later, he gets the endorsement from Trump.
Right.
And
Sununu gets the endorsement.
Sununu gets it. And I always go back to Chris Sununu, who's called, he called Trump at one point a effing crazy person or whatever he did. You think there's a connection there?
No. I think it's purely transactional. I think Trump wants to continue to control the Senate, reduce the chances of being impeached, and as a result, he looks at New Hampshire. He says, "Okay, Scott Brown is a short hitter. He's just not the sharpest guy, and he's already lost to a Democrat in the past. Democrats should have some advantage in the midterms. Historically, they do. But Sununu is the name and has a chance to defeat Pappas, a real chance to defeat Pappas, and Brown doesn't. And so Trump took a look and said, gee, I want a Republican in the seat in New Hampshire, and to turn over Shaheen's seat, turn it from Democrat to Republican, which probably won't happen with a lot of seats in the midterm elections. And so I'm going to back the guy who has the best chance of winning and to keep the Republican control of the Senate. Very transactional.
Did you see what Chris Pappas commented?
Yeah, you forwarded it to me.
Yeah, it was funny because he said, and I do remember that I did email because it was funny, because Chris Pappas is not a funny guy.
No.
And so someone must on his staff, and he says, I'm Chris Pappas. When Trump endorsed Sununu, I'm Chris Pappas, and I support this message. Yes. So that's the question. Do you think Trump is going to help or hurt? I mean, I guess he's going to help in balance.
He'll help in just wrapping up the primary. So that
he didn't need it.
Well, he won't need to spend a lot of money on that, whether he did or not. I mean, if Trump had endorsed Brown, there might have been a competition in the primary. So this will finish off Brown. Brown's might even withdraw, and Sununu won't have to spend a lot of money on it. And so, but in the general election, if I'm Chris Pappas, I'm showing all the pictures I possibly can of Sununu next to Trump, and the headlines saying Trump endorses Sununu. That's how I'm going to run, because that's how Pappas pretty much has to run. He doesn't have some spectacular record. He doesn't have lots of stuff to point at. So he's going to do his best to tie Sununu to Trump, and it'll be effective. He'll win votes as a result. So in the general election, it'll help Pappas.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think, and John, I've always liked John, just personally, I just do. And I think he's just a classic moderate Republican. And I know, I don't remember specifically, I know I endorsed him over the 25 years. But I think this is the wrong election for him. I think it's going to be a tough. In fact, there was some analysis by the New Hampshire Journal guy, a Republican, before Sununu got in, and said if Shaheen stayed in, Republicans would win because of her age. But if Pappas is the nominee, then the Dems are going to win.
I think it's a tough call. Shaheen's a spectacular campaigner, and I don't know people who don't like her. If you've ever met her, she's just a nice, gracious, class person. So I'm not sure I agree, because Pappas has made some mistakes. He's annoyed some people. And there's a story about how he refused to meet with people who were opposed to federal policy in Gaza supporting Israel. And they wanted to meet with him and talk to him. And the Custer, the other congressperson, and the two senators all met with these people, and he refused to. And in fact, he sort of hid out, is the story. And in fact, had the police forcibly remove these people who were waiting in his office in Dover, his Dover office. And there was a woman in a wheelchair, and she had a bead. So he's got some stuff that is going to be a little bit of a drag. Having said that, he's a hard guy not to like. He's just a pleasant person. He's sharp. He's thoughtful and analytical. But he's very hesitant to take positions on anything. And that's been a good way to run for office in America, is by not taking positions.
He voted for whatever, some tranche of armaments to go to Israel. He voted for that, and
he
didn't.
So,
and he always prides himself on being bipartisan, whatever that means. But to me, it's just going to be R&D. At the end of the day, people are going to vote for, they want a senator who's Republican or Democrat, because they both basically vote on party lines anyway.
And that, in a midterm election like the one that's coming up, at least right now, the Democrats, the party out of power tends to be the one that does well. And so, yeah, you'd have to bet on Pappas, but Sununu will give him a run. I mean, there's no question. And unlimited money the Sununu family will collect on all the stuff they've given away. We don't have time, but someday we'll talk about these small nuclear reactors that Kelly Ayotte is so impassioned about, and how goofy that whole thing is, and how thoughtless and how ignorant the political people are when they talk about it. So you've made nuclear power, particularly these magical, super safe, wonderful little nuclear reactors, you've turned it into a political discussion as opposed to what it should be, which is a scientific and economic question.
Well, I know nothing about nuclear power, as you might expect, but I always wondered, even before this recent thing, is that if they can put little nuclear reactors on submarines and aircraft carriers, why can't you put them in a neighborhood?
Completely different technology. So I'll start right there. And the fact of the matter is, killing a couple hundred people on a submarine, or even a few thousand people on an aircraft carrier, who cares? Having it blow up in downtown Conway, that's a whole different story, politically. And so I'm just, that is part of the thinking on this. Having said that, nuclear, it should be a scientific discussion, and nuclear power is ridiculously safe given the amount of power it's generated and how few deaths across the world have occurred as a result of nuclear power. But the basic questions haven't been resolved. Still no idea what to do with all the waste. It depends who you ask, and I've done some research, but there are people who'll say it'll double or triple the amount of waste, these little nuclear reactors, per kilowatt generated, and there are those who'll say it'll be a little less waste will be generated, but it doesn't matter. There'll be piles and piles of nuclear waste that no one in the world knows what to do with.
But isn't Bill Gates converting one?
Absolutely. And 3 Mile Island, he's going to go take the one that had to be shut down in Pennsylvania that was near Pittsburgh and near populations, and it was shut down when it started to melt down. And Dartmouth College's president was the leader of the group that evaluated and assessed that and all that, and the end result was that the thing was shut down. Now they're reopening it. And Kelly Ayotte, with the support of the Free Staters, decided that we should have a bill that allows for off-grid power supplies, including nuclear ones, in New Hampshire, in order to power up data centers. And because they're off-grid, they don't have to comply with all the other requirements associated with safety and everything else that other power generation plants have to generate. So they've passed that. That's in place in New Hampshire. So you can come into New Hampshire and not with none, but with fewer regulations and requirements and oversight and safety, you can whip up your own little nuclear power plant, attach it to a data center, not hook it up to the grid and say, I'm good. And again, there are definitely still restrictions. There are still things that local communities can do and so on, but that process has started for a free-for-all to build hundreds of millions of dollars or billion-dollar data centers that will generate construction jobs when they go up and will generate virtually no employment after they're created. They're not the way for economic development. That's not a smart way for a state to promote economic development.
That's what I was going to ask, is that it makes no sense. I can see
none.
I can see debating it if you want a nuclear reactor that's going to help the grid, but if it's just only to power a data center.
I can only tell you, I don't know all the money that's changed hands, and I wish we had more investigative reporting in New Hampshire that would look at that. Look at John Sununu the Elder. How did the old John Sununu get elected governor and become chief of staff to Bush? Nuclear power.
Seacoast, yeah.
It was. Yeah. It was the.
And I know, Chris, they were always tied in with public service. And
absolutely.
Yeah, okay. Mr. Epstein, we call you, so I don't say Jeffrey, George. That was a very entertaining hour. It's always good to see you.
As always.
See you next month.
Enjoyed it. Thank you all for listening.